Picture this. You're a single person in Sydney. Decent job, no crazy lifestyle. You're not eating out every night, you're not driving a Tesla. And somehow, every single month, $3,974 walks out the door before you've done anything fun. That's the number. That's what a normal life costs in Sydney right now, before rent even touches your bank account. So the real question isn't whether Sydney is expensive. We already know that. The question is exactly where every dollar goes. Because once you see the breakdown, you can't unsee it. Most cities have a cost of living. Sydney has an entry fee, and the bouncer at the door doesn't care how good your resume is. You're not getting in comfortably for less than $90,000 a year. Let's talk about what a normal month actually looks like. Not someone popping bottles in Darling Harbor, not a backpacker surviving on 2-minute noodles. Just a regular person. Job, phone, a gym membership they use 3 times a week, and a fridge that has actual food in it. That person. What does their month cost? So let's break it down. Groceries first. A single person doing a reasonable weekly shop in Sydney is spending around $500 to $600 a month. And we're not talking Wagyu beef and imported cheese. We're talking chicken, eggs, vegetables, some pasta, maybe a 6-pack on a Friday. Normal stuff. Already $550 gone before you've touched anything else. Utilities. Power, water, gas for a standard 1-bedroom apartment runs around $294 a month, which sounds fine until you realize that's just to keep the lights on and take a hot shower. Your mobile plan is another $33. Broadband is around $78. And your monthly transport pass, because you do have a job you need to get to, that's $217. So let's add this up. $550 groceries, $294 utilities, $33 phone, $78 internet, $217 transport. That's already $1,172, and we haven't touched food outside the house, clothing, a haircut, a doctor's visit, or literally anything that makes life feel like life and not a prison sentence with better weather. Once you stack in the rest, eating out occasionally, personal care, subscriptions, the random stuff that just happens every month, you're sitting at close to $4,000 every single month just to exist here before rent. Let that sink in. $4,000 a month is $48,000 a year. Gone. Not invested, not saved, not spent on anything you'd put in a highlight reel. Just vaporized into groceries and electricity bills and train rides where someone's always eating something that smells like a crime. Here's a way to think about it. A brand new compact car in Australia runs about $25,000 to $30,000. Sydney's basic living costs before rent are blowing through nearly 2 of those every single year. You are buying a new car annually and driving it straight off a cliff into the Pacific Ocean, and you don't even get the car. And here's what gets people on Oz Finance absolutely fired up. It's not that any single one of these costs is outrageous. Nobody's looking at a $78 internet bill and losing their mind. It's that they all land at the same time every month without mercy, and together they hit like a freight train. People post on there genuinely confused, saying things like, "I earn decent money, I don't spend big, so where is it all going?" And the answer is, Sydney ate it. Quietly, in small bites. But here's what nobody tells you when you're negotiating your starting salary or planning your big move to Sydney. That $90,000 job offer, it's not $90,000. By the time the basics are covered, you're playing defense with whatever's left. And whatever's left is doing a lot of heavy lifting when rent hasn't even shown up yet. Compare that to Melbourne or Adelaide, where the same lifestyle, same groceries, same utilities, same train pass, runs noticeably cheaper every month. Sydney doesn't just cost more, it costs more for everything, all at once with no opt-out button. You can't negotiate with your electricity bill. You can't talk your train pass down. The city just charges you extra for existing inside it. The Sydney Premium isn't one giant expense you can plan around. It's 100 small ones that quietly gang up on you at the end of every month. And rent? Rent is a completely different monster that we haven't even touched yet. Okay, so let's do the math nobody actually wants to do. You're earning $100,000. That sounds solid, right? That sounds like you've made it, like you can breathe, like Sydney is finally going to start making sense. Pull up a calculator, seriously, because what's left after tax and rent is going to make you want to lie face down on your very expensive apartment floor. First, taxes. Australia's tax system means a $100,000 salary does not land $100,000 in your bank account. Not even close. After income tax and the Medicare levy, you're taking home somewhere around $73,000 to $75,000 a year. So call it about $6,100 a month hitting your account. That's your real number. That's what you actually have to work with. Now subtract rent. A one-bedroom apartment in Sydney's city centre runs about $3,695 a month right now. And if you go outside the center to save some cash, you're still looking at around $2,372. So if you want to live anywhere near where things actually happen in this city, you're handing over roughly 60% of your take-home pay just to have a place to sleep. 60% gone, before you've bought a single egg. Here's where it gets really painful. $6,100 take-home minus $3,695 rent leaves you $2,405. Sounds workable, right? Except we just spent the last section establishing that basic monthly living costs for one person in Sydney run close to $3,974. So you subtract that and you are already in the red. On a $100,000 salary, in the red. That's not a budgeting problem. That's a city problem. This is the twist that nobody warns you about. This is the thing that makes people who move to Sydney from interstate feel genuinely scammed. The number on the job offer looks incredible. The number in your bank account at the end of month 1 looks like a clerical error. And the worst part is there's no mystery. The math is just brutal and straightforward, and it doesn't care about your feelings. Now take that same $100,000 salary and put it in Adelaide or Brisbane. Rent for a comparable one-bedroom apartment there might run $1,500 to $1,800 a month. Suddenly, you've got hundreds of dollars of actual breathing room every single month. Money that just stays in your account. Money you didn't have to fight for or sacrifice for. It's just there because the city isn't consuming it. And that gap compounds fast. Over a full year, the difference between renting in Sydney versus Brisbane or Adelaide on the same salary could be $10,000 to $15,000 in money you actually get to keep. That's a return flight to Europe and a good time when you land. That's a used car. That's not stress eating instant ramen on a Tuesday night wondering where it all went. Go look at Oz Finance on Reddit right now. Seriously, just scroll for 5 minutes. You will find thread after thread of people earning 6 figures who describe feeling completely broke, not because they're out here buying Gucci belts and eating lobster, but because Sydney's rent-to-income ratio is just structurally brutal. One person said they felt like they were running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up. That's not a personal finance failure. That's just Sydney doing Sydney things. And here's the thing. This isn't a vibe or a feeling or an excuse people use to justify bad spending habits. It's arithmetic. A $100,000 salary in Sydney genuinely does function like $50,000 somewhere else. And rent is the single biggest reason why. The numbers just work out that way every time. But here's what nobody tells you when you're signing that lease. Not all of Sydney is equally brutal. Where exactly you choose to plant your flag can swing your rent by over $1,300 a month. And that choice, that specific decision about which suburb you pick, comes with its own very particular kind of financial pain that most people don't see coming until it's too late. So you're picturing the Sydney lifestyle, right? Morning coffee with harbor views, maybe a jog along Bondi Beach, that whole thing. Here's what that dream actually costs, and I'm calling it the beach tax, because that's exactly what it is, a tax for vibes. Here's the thing about Sydney's rental market. It's not one market. It's like 5 completely different cities stacked on top of each other, each one more expensive than the last the closer you get to water. The CBD and the eastern coastal suburbs, Bondi, Coogee, Manly, these places operate in a totally different financial universe than the Outer West. Same city on the map, completely different planet when the rent bill lands. A 1-bedroom apartment in Bondi or the CBD can run $600 to $800 a week right now. That's not a typo. I didn't accidentally add a zero. Meanwhile, the exact same size apartment out in Parramatta or Blacktown might be $400 to $450 a week. Same Sydney, wildly different number. And the apartment in Parramatta has the same number of bedrooms, the same walls, the same ceiling. It just doesn't have the Instagram location tag. Let's do the monthly math because this is where it gets genuinely painful. $700 a week in Bondi works out to about $3,033 a month. $420 a week in Parramatta is $1,820 a month. The beach tax, the pure premium you're paying just for proximity to water, is over $1,200 every single month. You're not getting $1,200 worth of extra apartment. You're getting salt air and the ability to say, yeah, I live near Bondi at parties. That's $14,400 a year. Let that sink in. $14,400 every year for a view, for a location tag, for the right to jog past people who also paid the beach tax and are also quietly going broke. You could fly business class to Europe and back for that money, twice. But here's what nobody tells you. The beach tax doesn't stop at rent. The whole ecosystem around these coastal suburbs prices itself to match. Cafes charge more because they can. Restaurants charge more because the people who chose to pay $3,000 a month in rent are clearly willing to pay $28 for a bowl of pasta. Even some grocery stores near the coast run higher than their Western counterparts. The beach tax is a subscription service, and you didn't read the terms and conditions before you signed up. And here's the part that actually gets me. The people paying it aren't all rolling in money. A lot of them are just regular people who wanted the lifestyle and are now quietly bleeding out every month. They're splitting a 2-bedroom apartment 3 ways and calling it a share house situation, like that makes it less chaotic. They're making it work, technically, but the margin is razor thin and one unexpected expense away from a very bad month. The outer suburbs do offer a real discount. Penrith, Liverpool, Campbelltown, rents drop significantly out there, and your dollar genuinely goes further. But that discount isn't free. You pay it back in commute time and transport costs, and the very specific psychological toll of a 90-minute train ride each way, 5 days a week, sitting next to someone who brought a hot meal onto public transport for reasons nobody can explain. So the beach tax is real. It's quantifiable. It's over $14,000 a year for a huge chunk of Sydney renters. And whether it's worth it is completely your call. Some people would pay it 10 times over for that lifestyle and genuinely don't regret it. But you should at least know you're making the choice. Because a lot of people sign a Bondi lease thinking they're just renting an apartment and then spend the next 12 months wondering why their bank account looks the way it does. Now, rent is the biggest gut punch in the Sydney budget, but groceries are the one that hits you over and over every single week in a way that just slowly grinds you down. You walk into Woolworths, you grab the basics. You did not buy steak. You did not buy fancy cheese. You bought eggs, bread, chicken, some vegetables, and somehow the total is $180. You stand there staring at the screen like it's personally attacked you. And the worst part? You did nothing wrong. That's just what groceries cost in Sydney right now. Here's the thing about grocery costs. They're not the biggest line item in your budget. Rent is still the boss, but groceries are the one that hits you over and over every single week without mercy in a way that just slowly grinds you down. There's no escaping it. You have to eat. Sydney knows this. Sydney does not care. Let's put some actual numbers on it. A dozen eggs runs around $8 right now, ranging anywhere from $5.60 to $12 depending on where you shop. A kilo of chicken breast averages about $13.70. A loaf of bread is roughly $3.57. A litre of milk is around $2.73. None of those prices are individually insane, but stack them all together for a full weekly shop and a single person is spending $120 to $180 every week. That's without buying anything interesting. That's survival food math. And for a family of 4, monthly grocery costs can swing anywhere from $1,200 to over $2,000 depending on what you're buying. Let that sink in. That's not a grocery budget anymore. That's a second rent payment in a cheaper Australian city, just to feed 4 people at a completely normal, non-fancy level. Now, Reddit is genuinely split on this one. Some people swear Sydney groceries are cheaper than London or New York. Others say that's only true if you shop like a monk. And honestly, both sides are kind of right. You can eat cheaply in Sydney, but cheaply means meal prepping every Sunday, buying home brand everything, and treating a $12 block of cheese like it's a special occasion. One person on Oz Finance described managing food costs at $50 per person per week by cooking every single meal at home and never eating out. And yeah, that works. But that's also a part-time job you didn't sign up for. But here's what nobody tells you. The hidden cost isn't just what you spend at Woolworths. It's that eating out in Sydney is also brutal. A basic lunch near the CBD runs $18 to $22 easily. Not a nice lunch. A basic one. A sandwich and a drink. So if you're not cooking at home, you're getting hit from both sides. Expensive groceries when you do cook, expensive restaurants when you don't. And don't even get me started on coffee. A regular coffee near the CBD runs $5 to $6. You grab one every morning on your way to work because you are a human person who needs to function. That's $150 a month on coffee. That's not a lifestyle choice at that point. That's just Tuesday and Wednesday and every other day until you die. The meal prep crowd has genuinely figured this out though. Cooking at home, buying in bulk, hitting the weekend markets for cheaper produce. You can pull your food costs down significantly if you put in the work. But it takes time and discipline that gets really hard to find after a 90-minute commute and a full day at the office. The math works. The energy required to execute it doesn't always. So groceries alone aren't what destroys your Sydney budget, but combined with the cost of eating out, they build a $500 to $700 monthly wall that every single person in this city runs into, regardless of their suburb, their salary, or how many times they've told themselves they'll start meal prepping this week. And speaking of costs that hit you no matter what you do, let's talk about getting around Sydney, because transport is the expense that punishes you specifically for every choice you've already made about where to live. So you did the smart thing. You moved to the outer suburbs to save on rent. You're saving $1,200 a month. You're basically a financial genius. And then you actually look at your commute and your transport bill and you realize you've just traded one problem for a slightly different, more exhausting problem. Here's the thing about Sydney's public transport. It covers a massive area, which sounds great until you realize that covered and convenient are two completely different things. A monthly transport pass runs $217. A single one-way trip is $5.60. And if you're coming in from the Outer West, Penrith, Campbelltown, Blacktown, you're looking at 60 to 90 minutes each way, every single day. And that's not just a money cost, that's a time cost, and it's a big one. 2 hours a day on trains and buses adds up to 10 hours a week, 40 hours a month. That's a full extra work week every single month that you're spending on a train going somewhere instead of actually being somewhere. And you're paying $217 for that privilege. You're literally paying to lose 40 hours of your life every month. But here's what nobody tells you before you sign that outer suburbs lease. A lot of people out there can't rely on public transport alone. In many outer suburbs, a car isn't a luxury, it's survival. And car ownership in Sydney is its own whole financial situation. Fuel is sitting around $1.88 per liter right now. A new compact car will run you about $40,000. Then you've got insurance, registration, and if you're driving into the city, parking, which is its own special kind of highway robbery. Here's the twist. The people who move to Penrith to save $1,200 a month on rent are often spending $400 to $500 extra every month on transport, fuel, and car costs compared to someone who lives closer in. So that $1,200 saving, it's not $1,200 anymore. It's maybe $700, maybe $800 if you're lucky and disciplined. The savings shrink fast and they don't stop shrinking. And then there's the cost that doesn't show up on any spreadsheet, the emotional one. You get home at 7:30 p.m. after a 90-minute commute and you have basically nothing left. No energy to cook a proper meal, no motivation to go meet friends, no desire to do anything that actually makes living in Sydney feel worth it. You just sit there, exhausted, on your cheaper couch in your cheaper apartment, too tired to enjoy the money you technically saved. One Reddit user put it pretty bluntly: public transport sucks. Expect to pay quite a bit on fuel. That's not a complaint. That's just an accurate description of outer suburbs life. The people who genuinely make the outer suburbs work are usually doing one of two things. Either they've found a suburb with a direct, fast train line into the city, so the commute is painful, but at least it's predictable, or they've negotiated hybrid work, 2 or 3 days in the office instead of 5, so they're not doing the full commute every single day. That second option has genuinely changed the math for a lot of people out west. But let's just run the real numbers side by side, because this is where it gets clarifying. Someone paying $3,695 a month for a city center apartment might spend literally $0 on transport because they walk to work. Someone paying $1,820 in Parramatta might spend $400 a month getting around. The gap between those two rents was $1,875. The transport costs eat almost half of that gap before you've even blinked. The outer suburbs discount is real. Nobody's saying it isn't, but it is absolutely not as big as it looks when you're scrolling through rental listings at midnight telling yourself you've cracked the code. Once transport costs enter the equation, pass, car, fuel, or all three, you're handing back a huge chunk of what you thought you'd saved. Now you've got rent, groceries, transport, and utilities all laid out. So let's zoom all the way out and talk about what happens when you add a family into this equation, because that's when Sydney stops being expensive and starts being genuinely ruthless. Everything we've talked about so far assumes you're a single person. Now add a partner, add a kid. Suddenly, the numbers don't just go up, they multiply in ways that feel almost personal. Like Sydney sat down and specifically designed its cost structure to punish people for having a family. Here's the number that stops people cold. A family of 4 in Sydney is spending around $9,641 a month on living costs before they've paid a single dollar in rent. Not $4,000 like a single person, nearly $10,000 just gone before anyone has a roof over their head. That's not a typo, and it's not an extreme case. That's the average baseline for a normal family living a normal life in this city. So then you add rent. A 3-bedroom apartment in Sydney's city center runs close to $6,898 a month. Even outside the center, you're looking at $4,000 to $5,000 for something with enough bedrooms that your kids aren't sleeping in a cupboard. Stack that on top of the $9,641 in living costs, and a family of 4 needs to clear somewhere between $15,000 and $17,000 a month just to break even. Just to survive. Not thrive, survive. That means a combined household income of well over $200,000 a year after tax. 2 people each earning $100,000, which genuinely sounds like a lot of money, are actually just barely keeping their heads above water in central Sydney. 2 6-figure salaries and you're treading water. Let that sink in. And here's the part that deserves its own entire video: childcare. Sydney childcare costs are among the highest in Australia, and private full-day preschool or kindergarten can run around $3,124 a month per child. Per child. So if you've got 2 young kids in care, you're potentially adding $6,000 a month on top of everything else we just talked about. The family budget at that point isn't a budget anymore. It's a hostage situation. Now here's where the comparison to other cities gets genuinely stark. A family of 4 in Adelaide is spending around $6,700 a month on living costs. Brisbane is around $7,227. Melbourne sits at about $8,061. Sydney is $9,641. So compared to Adelaide, a Sydney family is spending nearly $3,000 more every single month just on day-to-day costs, before rent, before childcare. That's not a small gap. That's a family holiday every single month that just evaporates into the Sydney premium. A lot of families try to crack this by going further out, buying a house in the outer suburbs where prices are lower and there's actually a backyard. And that works, kind of. But here's the catch. Now you need 2 cars. Now both parents are doing long commutes. Now the transport costs are climbing, the time costs are climbing, and those outer suburb savings start shrinking in exactly the same way we saw for single renters, just multiplied by 2 adults who are both exhausted by Thursday.